We'll be starting in just a minute, but we're just passing out some information and also going to send around a sign-up sheet. So if people are interested in staying up to date on what's going on in the campaign, especially here in the Tampa Bay area, just put down your contact information and we'll follow up with you. The copy machine broke, so a couple of these are a little bit grassroots, we like to say. But write as legibly as possible and we'll get a hold of you. So we'll start a couple of them.
Love you, Joe.
We'll call this mood lighting for a minute. Welcome, everybody. My name is Joe Parker, and I'm with the Alliance for Fair Food. We're based in Immokalee, and we're part of a national network of allies who are standing together with farm workers for justice in the fields and in our food system. So we are really pleased tonight to have with us Sylvia Perez, who is a member of the CIW, a farm worker herself, you saw in the film, as well as some local leaders here from the Tampa Bay area, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And I'm going to turn it over to Sean from WMNF, who's going to be facilitating a quick little talk back after the film. So.
Thanks. I'm Sean Canan with WMNF News, and the Student Farm Worker Alliance asked me to moderate the panel discussion. And so I thought maybe the first thing we would do is have Sylvia introduce herself and have the other panelists introduce themselves. Will you introduce yourself, Sylvia, please?
Buenas noches a todos, yo soy miembro del Estado de la Coalición, pero nosotros también damos las gracias aquí, que ustedes también vieron aquí este documental que es muy importante para nosotros y para ustedes también.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Sylvia, and I'm a staff member with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, and we're so grateful to you to have come out tonight and shared in this documentary that we were so thrilled to share with you. That's a very important piece, both for us as farm workers and also for all of you who are allies to us.
Hello, my name is Amanda Slivey, and I'm a local ally. I'm from St. Petersburg, Florida. I've been participating in actions against Publix for about 5 years now. I see many familiar faces in the audience. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and look forward to this quick talk.
I'm Reverend Bernice Powell Jackson. I'm the pastor of First United Church of Tampa. And I've been involved with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers since the Taco Bell days, so that's about 14 years, I believe.
They have an action tomorrow. The Student Farm Worker Alliance was telling me about an action that's happening tomorrow at a Publix that's very close to this theater. And maybe Amanda, would you be the best person to talk about where the alliance?
Joe.
All right. So yeah, tomorrow, if you're able to join us at 5:30, about 5 minutes from this theater, it's at 7018 West Waters Avenue, and it's on the orange flyer that you have. We're going to have an action outside of Publix. If you've never participated in an action with CIW before, as you may have seen on the screen, although it won't be quite that big, they're really beautiful experiences. They're colorful, lots of art. We're going to start with a little picket, and then we'll move into more of a vigil as it gets a little darker. And we'll be sure and deliver a letter to the management to let them know why we're there as well. So invite you to come out and join us.
Can you hear without the microphone?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's try it.
I want to ask Reverend Bernice, why is your congregation involved in this? What does this have to do with UCC, or why would you be involved?
God says what is required of you is to do justice, and so this is a prime example of doing justice, and we've seen it over and over again as more and more companies have signed that it's possible to see justice happen in our own lifetime. So we're close to getting Publix. We need everybody to be involved in the Publix campaign. It's not until each one of us goes to our local Publix and says to them, this is important to us, that we will see change. Our farm workers, brothers and sisters, are already doing their part. It's time for the rest of us to step up.
Amen.
You know, it's watching the film and covering the Coalition of Immokalee Workers for years and years. You know, we saw the Taco Bell agree to the Fair Food Agreement, and then all the others, Burger King, McDonald's. And yet, for years, I've been calling Publix, and I've been speaking with Shannon, and for years she's been telling me it's a labor dispute. Just like you heard the tape on the film, it's a labor dispute. We don't get involved in labor disputes. Amanda, what is it? What do you think might change Publix's mind?
Well, unfortunately, Publix doesn't care about the workers. We've seen that over and over again with their refusal to talk to the workers. So it's going to take people like us. And we're in a unique and special position as Floridians, as neighbors of Publix, to continue to pressure them. As Lucas from the CIW mentioned in the film, it's not going to be a single action maybe that will change their mind, but over time, eventually, Publix will have to change their minds with continuous pressure, and that's the thing. So every year we will be back. Every year we will do a major action in the Tampa Bay area. And every year we will continue to grow this movement little by talking with folks like you all who were so great to come out to the film tonight. And as Lucas from the Coalition said, it's not charity, right? We didn't make it to the big screen by people throwing money at the Coalition. It was people like me and you who want to be aware of what's going on, who have helped build this movement. And we can continue to build that by knowing what's going on. Please sign the sign-in sheet so we can keep in touch, and more people can come out every year to every action and show Publix that this movement has momentum, and we will not stop until they sign.
We want to go to questions from the audience very soon, but I want to ask Sylvia, we see the depictions of what it's like to be a farm worker. We see them in the film. We've heard about them in the news stories over the years. What kind of insight can you give us about what it's like to harvest tomatoes or strawberries, or to be a farm worker in Florida?
Ok, para que, como vimos ahí, para un trabajador del campo es un poquito muy difícil, muy duro, porque para un trabajador del campo no tiene un trabajo seguro, no tiene como un salario que va a ganar a la semana. Para un trabajador puede trabajar 2 o 3 días en diferentes compañías.
As you saw in the film, being a farm worker is very difficult work, and especially given that farm labor is not a fixed job day to day. You never know if you're going to have a job, you never know how much you're going to make. It varies from week to week.
No importa que el trabajo sería pesado, cargar la cubeta de 36 libras, ¿verdad? Pero con que ese trabajador ganara un pago seguro, un sueldo fijo, ¿verdad? Que sean pagados por las corporaciones, sería bueno. Pero los trabajadores casi dejan toda la vida ahí en el trabajo y ganar como el dinero es bien poquito para mantener sus familias.
And it's not just that the work is difficult, that's something that we can deal with, although carrying a heavy bucket is a lot of work. It weighs up to 36 pounds when it's over full of tomatoes, but to know that you're doing that and not being paid fairly for doing so is another thing. And so if we were able to make a dignified wage doing that work, that would be so much better, and that would be a livable job.
Por eso lo que queremos es presionar a Publix para que Publix también sea parte de estos acuerdos que ya las otras corporaciones ya están trabajando. Lo que necesitamos que ellos también pagarían el centavo y que el trabajador tiene la voz de reportar los problemas que algunos trabajadores todavía, porque donde Publix compra su producto son donde ranchos todavía que no están participando todavía.
And that's why it's so important that Publix and other companies join this program, that they pay that extra penny to support a living wage for farm workers in their supply chain, and through the support of the enforcement of the code of conduct in their supply chain, ensure that workers' voices are respected on the job, that they're able to speak up and report abuses that are happening and see that they're actually being resolved. That's why we want them to be a part of this program, because as long as they're outside of the program, they continue to provide a market for growers who want to continue doing business as usual, buying their tomatoes, no questions asked.
Y ahorita los trabajadores que ya las corporaciones que ya están pagando el centavo, ya están trabajando junto con los trabajadores con la coalición, los trabajadores ya están recibiendo el centavo por cada libra que ellos compran el tomate y también tener derecho a tener sombra o reportar cualquier problema que ese trabajador puede enfrentar en el trabajo. Y ahora ese trabajador puede hablar y no puede ser despedido, puede tener su trabajo en la misma compañía o seguir trabajando, aunque pasa problemas, pero ese trabajador ahora tiene ese derecho de reportar los problemas que antes enfrentaba uno mucho.
And now we see that these changes are actually concrete, that they're starting to take root. That, for example, there are 12 companies who are paying that extra penny, and that's starting to come through for the workers picking the tomatoes being sold to those corporations. We see that on participating farms, there's now shade being installed for farm workers to be able to take a break when they're overheated. We see that people's voices are being listened to, that people can speak up about problems without the fear of being fired, as would have happened in the past. And that's why it's so important to continue building this program.
Y también lo que necesitamos también presionar a Wendy's, también aquí en la Florida pues tenemos la campaña con Wendy's, también hay que seguir presionando a Wendy's y a Publix, pero también ahí yo creo que ustedes ya recibieron ahí un papelito, que en ese papelito también es unas cosas importantes que a lo mejor ustedes tienen como los buenos teléfonos y que también puede como poner como algo importante en el Facebook o algo así para que Publix también se dé cuenta, entonces que no están los trabajadores solos, también que tenemos a ustedes para apoyar a los trabajadores.
And we also have a campaign ongoing with Wendy's, who's the major fast food holdout. And so they're also here in Florida, as you all know. And one other thing that we're asking people to do, in addition to coming out to the action tomorrow, if you're able to make it, is also to show your support on social media. And that's one way that we can show that we're standing together with farm workers, that they're not alone. So this is the time that we're allowing you to take out your cell phones if you have them, and get on Twitter and Facebook, and there are some example messages on that little yellow sheet. You can add your voice of support on social media, tag Publix, tag Wendy's, tag the film, and let them know that we're hearing what's happening and that we support farm workers in this struggle.
Entonces la participación de ustedes también es muy importante, entonces ustedes pueden decir que ustedes hoy en esta noche vieron una película muy importante que les interesó bastante y eso es lo que queremos, ¿verdad? El apoyo de ustedes, pero también para mañana vamos a tener esta protesta muy importante y también la invitación es para ustedes. A las 5:30 de la tarde tenemos la protesta aquí en Tampa y así que pues nosotros también tenemos el apoyo de ustedes y de los estudiantes también y de parte de nosotros también como trabajadores.
And that's one way of showing your support, letting them know that you enjoyed the film, learned something, and are standing with farm workers, but also again want to extend the invitation to join us tomorrow. We'll be there together with students from the area, people of faith, different community members standing together with farm workers, and we extend to you that invitation to come and join us.
Is there anyone who has a question for any of the panelists? I see a question back there.
I'm interested for some guidance in developing what I would call some laser talks that we can use with public managers to combat or counter their corporate line that they give when they are approached by customers at the store. They seem to have a pretty pat response. I think you could have some help in those laser talks.
Is there anyone who would,
I think it's a great idea, and I think maybe that's one of the things you could develop is like a 90-second thing, and also a couple of responses to what we know
are Publix pat answers, because you're right, they always give the same answers.
Joe, is there a response?
There is, and we can share that with people. There is kind of a one-pager that talks a lot about the various things that Publix has said publicly. Y también si quieres hablar de la carta.
Por ahí vamos a tener unas cartas también que ustedes también si quieren llevar esa carta y también explicarles a ellos que por qué ellos se están negando de participar. Ya entonces ahí vamos a estar repartiendo, es una hoja que ustedes también la pueden llevar y llevar al supermercado, a los managers también de Publix.
And one thing that we have with us tonight is also a manager letter that you can take with you to Publix that explains some of those things and addresses a lot of the things that they've been saying. Let them know that you saw the film and that you support the CIW and want them to be a part of the Fair Food Program.
I think also it's important to know, I don't think there's anything that we can say to Publix to make them change their mind. I think what will change Publix's mind is individuals like us continuing to talk to the managers by bringing a letter or simply voicing your concern of where your tomatoes are coming from, and with that pressure over time building eventually will change their mind. But I don't think there's a certain point that we can make to make them change their minds, because they've already showed us. There's been hunger strikes, a 200-mile march, several marches from Tampa to Lakeland, and none of these things have caught their attention. So I don't think there's a single point that's going to change their mind. That's where we're going.
Could I just respond to this, what you can do? Well, one thing I do is when I go into Publix and I get in the checkout line and the person asks me, well, did you find everything you wanted here today? And I said, no, I don't. I haven't found fair paying tomatoes. If they don't know what it is, I take a minute to explain it to them. So that, I do that quite often when I'm in Publix.
For companies who have agreed to pay the penny more pound for tomatoes, or who may in the future, how do they guarantee that penny gets to the workers? Anybody in the food distribution chain can keep that penny, any company or individual. So how do you guarantee that?
So what does the CIW do to make sure that they get the benefits?
Tenemos también hay otro grupo de trabajadores que se llama Trabajadores por el Consejo de Comida Justa. Ellos son los que se encargan de investigar y entran ahí hasta la compañía de los ranchos, y ellos son los que se encargan si el centavo está llegando directamente o cuánto de dinero es lo que se está distribuyendo a cada trabajador.
In addition to the CIW, there's also a third-party monitoring organization called the Fair Food Standards Council that's based in Sarasota and was created specifically for the monitoring and enforcement of the Fair Food Program. So in addition to doing audits on farms, they're also opening the books of all participating buyers, growers, and looking at payrolls and pay stubs to ensure every month that those pennies are going to the workers that pick the tomatoes.
And if I can piggyback, if you don't mind, about a month ago, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers unveiled the Fair Foods label, and so that will be coming out soon in the supermarkets or in the restaurants that have already agreed to the Fair Foods. You can actually see that on the tomatoes. Amanda, do you have anything to add about that, or Joe, do you know anything more than that?
It's going to come out first in Whole Foods. It'll be kind of a poster this year that talks about what the Fair Food Program is, and then the vision is eventually over the next year or so to start actually placing labels on tomatoes so that consumers going into the store can see a tomato and know that this one came from the Fair Food Program. So it's something that we've wanted to wait until we were at the point where we could say definitely these came from a place where people were treated with dignity and respect before we start putting stickers on tomatoes. We didn't want it to be an empty thing, and we're kind of finally at that point in some places. And so over the next year or so, you may start seeing that in your grocery stores.
Yes.
In the past, have the supermarkets that have become participants in the coalition and fight and began paying the penny, has there been a way that you guys have brought them together as allies to work together towards those that are holdouts? Has that ever been done in the past, maybe with the fast foods? In other words, you know, when you get a Walmart behind you and a Safeway behind you or whoever else those are,
Sí, el Walmart está participando, pero yo creo que ellos no tienen como ese poder para apoyar a los otros ranchos que no son participantes. Ellos no tienen ese poder para exigir a los otros que participen.
Yeah, companies like Walmart are participating, but what we've seen so far is that they haven't really taken a stand against other companies who are not. And I would just add, oftentimes it's just kind of a business thing that they don't want to be involved in sort of bad-mouthing another business is what's been our experience so far.
Sure, and in the past, I guess, as you said, it's very difficult to say much more to public, so you have to do much more. So has there been in the past a type of boycotting of tomatoes for any way, shape, or form on a large scale? Where there's been a mass, maybe there's a week-long or a month-long strike of purchasing tomatoes from them, bringing them to the stand and then leaving them there when you go to check out each time and people do it mass.
We did a similar action to that. Our local fair food group, Tampa Bay Fair Food, we went to Publix and we purchased tomatoes and we immediately returned them because, as Publix shoppers know, Publix has a policy that says, well, you can return anything for any reason and we'll gladly, give you a refund, smile on our face. So we did that and we immediately had the police called on us. So that didn't work out very well, but.
We've also done pray-ins in the vegetable part of Publix and had the police call in.
Yes, sir.
Back in Chavez and Cortez Day, there was a great boycott, and following up this man's thoughts, after a 200-mile march, walk, protest, which was wonderful, isn't the next step boycotting Publix, not talking to managers, but showing them that it might not be a labor issue, but it's an economic issue.
Eso yo creo, a ese punto todavía no se llega, pero como con ellos no se está pidiendo como un problema o una disputa laboral con ellos, pero entonces sería como nomás presionarlos o para que ellos lo hagan lo correcto, ¿verdad? Porque tampoco no se va a ver bien que le van a hacer como un boicot a Publix.
So far, we as the coalition feel like we haven't quite gotten to the point where we want to declare a boycott. That would sort of be the last tactic, though I would add that there are some communities and some individuals who have taken it upon themselves to do that. But we believe that there's still other tactical things to come before we declare a boycott of Publix. It's also an issue here too. Oftentimes communities don't have anywhere else to go, which makes it difficult and is an unfortunate reality in many ways, but it's the reality.
Another question?
What about Wendy's? Where do they stand?
Con la Winn-Dix con eso todavía no, porque todavía no terminamos con Publix o con Wendy's. Hasta que se termina con eso, también tal vez vendrán más enseguida, pero hasta que se convence a Publix y Wendy's todavía.
They're not yet participating, but we also haven't had a public campaign with them, and we want to finish the campaigns with Wendy's and with Publix before we move on. So they have received letters, but are not yet participating.
¿Ya no hay más preguntas?
Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Christian. I'm originally from Brazil, and I help a lot of Brazilian immigrants here as well. I work with the Department of Agriculture, doing everything you guys do here, but in Brazil. Do you think maybe Publix has something to do with the immigration political issue?
In what sense?
On the labor side, is that they call it a labor issue and classify it as an immigration issue as well. They don't want to get into that fight as part of their policy.
Because I go to Publix, I fight with them all the time, about where the food comes from. They don't give me any potential. They don't even talk. They don't even, like the same. I do this every day when I go there. So I'm wondering, what is their problem? It's way simpler than that. Because me, I'm doing the campaign for you guys. I put on Facebook and immediately get response about immigration. And I told them, it's not about being Democrat or Republican. It's not about agreeing with immigration or not. This is human rights, and we all have to fight for it. That's bottom line.
Personally, I think it's arrogance
It's the arrogance of power. It's the arrogance of a corporation that makes $3 billion a year. It's the arrogance of a corporation that has, I don't know what the percentage of shoppers in the state of Florida, but it would be a very high percentage. And it's a leftover from the days of slavery. This is modern day slavery. Make no mistake about it. We can directly look at it. There are connections. We can see it. So it's part of that. It's part of that whole mentality. And it's part of the economics of it all.
Is there another question?
I just want to add too that one of Publix's various excuses was also, oh, once we start paying an extra penny for tomatoes, are we going to start having to pay an extra penny for, other produce items and other items in our store? And, as a young person, that excites me. And I think yes, because no matter what, if you raise every item in your store by 1 penny, I still don't think that touches the profit margin. You know what I mean? So I think they're afraid of doing one thing towards the end of being aware of human rights, and then having to also look at all the other human rights abuses that are happening in other areas of the agricultural industry and other industries as well. So they'd rather stay completely blind and not take responsibility for anything, and rather than taking responsibility for something.
I see a hand in the back.
Has the CIW been working with any groups to give public employees a voice in their working conditions? Because it seems like one of the problems that we're facing here is that their own employees don't have a voice in what their employer is doing. Are there any plans to expand into growing solidarity and building strength in that way?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and not one that we have an easy answer to. There are a lot of Publix employees who tell us that they're supportive of this, and obviously, the CIW and their allies have always been supportive of other workers' struggles and believe that everybody deserves a fair wage, that everybody deserves human rights on the job in whatever form that takes, given what work you're doing. It's difficult because it often brings into question very serious consequences, there's a possibility of very serious consequences should anybody take action as a Publix employee. And also, given that Publix also tends to be a very anti-union company, anti-labor company in general, there's a lot of speculation around anyone who has any sort of interaction with the employees, and a lot of really harsh action that could potentially be taken to combat that. So it's a bit of a sort of sordid territory in that way, but is obviously something that matters. So I think as much as we can, we try to initiate those sorts of conversations and find ways that there can be mutual support without necessarily saying, as organizations of Publix employees and CIW at this moment, we're declaring an alliance, but kind of being strategic about it at least.
There's another part of the reality. Publix is a privately owned company, and its stockholders include its employees.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Small, but you say a penny a pound doubles the wages. Am I to understand that currently farm workers make